Our first presenter is a man that I've been working with for a few years. I have great respect for. He's been a mentor. And Joe Heath has been the general counsel for the Onondaga Nation since 1982 and an attorney since 1975. For the nation, his work centers on environmental protection, particularly under the Clean Water Act, focusing on Onondaga Lake and Onondaga Creek, archaeological site and unmarked burial site protection, NAGPRA repatriation and litigation, hunting and fishing rights, treaty rights, excise tax issues, and land rights. Joe didn't put this in his bio, but Joe, a few years ago, started doing lease workshops and has uncovered a systemic problem with fraud with leasing in New York State. And Joe has done over 30 lease workshops across the state, and he's been directly responsible for getting people out of gas leases when they've uncovered fraud. So, and all of this is gratis work. Joe is, yeah, he's amazing. So Joe has been researching the issues of fracking and sharing his knowledge of the many different environmental dangers created by fracking with community groups for 5 years. For the past 2.5 years, he has been educating landowners on how to terminate their leases and manage the many questionable ways gas companies are seeking to extend old leases. So Joe, come on up. Where are you?
One of the reasons for this, the main reason for this presentation, this is the first we will give others along the route if we find that people are interested, is one of the things I learned from the last 3 years of helping people with gas leases is that the gas companies and their landmen love to get to homes before people know what's really going on. And so what we want to do tonight is kind of level the playing field, tell you what they have proposed, where the routes are, and give you that kind of information so that you don't get caught off guard when the landman comes to your home and puts this push on you, this rush. And we'll go over some of the ways that they've done that on other pipelines, and it's just like the gas leases. They want you to sign right away before you have time to think about all the ramifications. The thing that makes pipelines worse than gas leases is that there's no end to them. A gas lease should be for 5 or 10 years. Once you sign an easement, or once there's an easement on your property, that lasts until both parties agree to end it. Now, many of you have existing easements. Those are almost inevitably not large enough for them to build this pipeline. But we'll come back to that later on. So we want to share that information with you and tell you what to expect when they come there, tell you what your rights are. So this is a very difficult to see map of the pipeline route. In May of this year, the Millennium Pipeline, and we'll get back to who are the corporate owners of that pipeline in a little while, announced this map with what they call a non-binding open season announcement. What that really means is that they're just giving us the preliminary indication of what their plan is and what they propose to do. And they have proposed a 24-inch pipeline that will run essentially north and south. This is the pre-existing Millennium Pipeline that runs east and west along the southern tier. They want to link that with the Tennessee Gas Pipeline that runs about 5 miles south of the thruway, maybe 10 miles south of the thruway, again, east and west. So it's really about moving frack gas from Pennsylvania so that they can distribute it more widely, and we'll come back to that. This is the map that they produced. We've tried to give you a more graphic portrayal of the route here, and it runs from essentially Johnson City in the south, through Broome County, through Cortland County, into Onondaga County, up the Tully Valley. We'll get back to some of the environmental dangers of this route. Many of you know them if you live along the route, and then eventually hooks up with the Tennessee in the north. And what I'm going to try to cover tonight is what they proposed, the route, the details of it, what will come along with the pipeline, some of the other hazards. We're going to encourage you not to take the first offer of the landman and explain to you why That is not wise. Very briefly, where we are in the FERC process, that's the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And we're very early on in that. We have that advantage where we can prepare. I'm going to give you a few pipeline explosions because you have to remember that pipelines explode rather regularly around the country. And that's one of the dangers. Where is the frack gas going? And then two websites and resources have stopped the pipeline. There is another pipeline that is proposed to run from Binghamton up to Albany that they call the Constitutional, where people have been working against that for quite a while. And they have a good website. We have just set up the Stop the I-81 pipeline. We'll give you those sites in a minute. And then what we can expect after tonight, where it will go from here. So this is one of the things that we've done from that general map that they gave out. We had volunteers go out because this is an old easement. Many of you who live near it know that there are markers out there where it crosses the road. We have some pictures of those in a minute. We had volunteers go out and take GPS readings of every one of those crossings, feed that back into a mapping system, and then compare that to county property owners' records so that we could see who the current landowners are that have an easement and that will be targeted by Millennium. And then the same mapping expert, this is one of our first early maps. It's been refined a little bit since then, but the reason to show you this is the town of Lafayette. If you can see that, this is Onondaga Creek where it crosses it multiple times. This is one of the problems that really worries me given what I know about the Tully Valley and the mud boils. These red dots here are the mud boils. Those of us in northern Cortland and Onondaga County know how unstable those are. So this is where they tried to take the old pipeline around that, but that was in the early 70s, and in the 40 years since then, there's been a lot more instability in the valley. That's one of the major environmental risks. This is a mud boil, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. These are mud volcanoes that are caused by the solution salt mining up in the Tully Valley. We'll come back to that in a minute because that's another dangerous area it goes through. And this is 30 tons of silt that is percolating up out of the Tully Valley, creates an incredibly unstable situation, and basically swallows up anything that they try to put on it. We had 20 years of attempts to hold these things back. About 3 years ago, all of those attempts to hold it back and keep it out of the creek failed, and now we have this 30 tons of silt going back into the creek every day. To go anywhere near this in the Tully Valley with any kind of construction just makes no sense whatsoever. This is an example of how the land keeps changing from solid to liquid. Putting a pipeline anywhere near that is just crazed. So then we run a little bit further south. This is the former salt mining area. I think we have another picture of that, if I remember. No, we'll come back here. So this red area is where the salt mining went on in the Tully Valley by the Solvay Process Company and then Allied Chemical for about a century. 120 wells, going down about 1,200 feet. And what they did was they used the water from the Tully Lakes, mainly from Crooked Lake here, and flushed the salt out of the valley, leaving a huge vacuum in the valley. About 5 carrier domes, we're told. And so when you take that much solid material out of a landmass, it tends to fill it in. And that's what's going on in the Tully Valley now. We have subsidence where the land is actually splitting apart. We have sinkholes that are 600 feet across, 50 feet deep. And this is the area here in the former salt mining area that this pipeline is proposed to run right through. Then as we go up this is Solvay Road, for those of you that live around here. This is the Clark concrete gravel mine. The path goes right along the edge of the gravel mine, but all of that is owned by Clark. This is the one that got my attention. These are the Kettle Lakes, and I'm lucky enough to live on one of those. This is Green Lake, which drains, and that's where the second map comes in. So it runs between these two kettle lakes, and this is a very sensitive wetland area between them. This is a close-up of that area where you can see Green Lake. This is all of a wetland. It drains into the north end of Tully Lake here, and then the south end of Tully Lake is the headwaters of the West Branch of the Tiofneoga River. So it's going to come that close to two of the glacial lakes across property. Up here in Quail Ridge, there are homes built on top of it. And so that's the kind of path that it has, that's proposed at this point. And those are some of the environmental issues in the local area that I'm familiar with. This is what, and one of the ways once you start looking for these things, you see them more than you have before. This is the way it's marked on the edge of a road. It's like a screw head, and that's the path of the pipeline. That's along Lake Road in Tully, between Green Lake over there and Tully Lake over here. The other kind of marker that you'll see are these. This is a similar, this marker is up on Route 80 in Tully. And that's an example of, that is taken from Route 80 in Tully. And that's the pipeline marker, and you can see that this house has been constructed very near the route of the old Sun oil pipeline. This is a 6-inch gas pipeline that was abandoned about 20 years ago. So that's some of the problems that some of our neighbors are going to experience. And if you think that they won't put a pipeline next to your house, remember that last picture and then this picture. Because when they come to your door, they're going to tell you a number of things are not negotiable, such as the pipeline route. And you do not want to give up the right to control them from coming that close to your house. So these are the towns that it will run through from the north to the south, the town of Onondaga, just a corner of Atisco. We saw Lafayette, Tully, Preble, Homer, Cortlandville, Virgil, Lapeer, Lisle, Nanticoke, Maine, and Union. Those are the towns that are impacted along the north-south road. And what they have told us so far, which is pretty minimal, is that they intend to build a 24-inch pipeline. That's a fairly large pipeline. It will be under very, very high pressure, up to 1,200 inches, pounds per square inch. Your average propane tank is between 1 and 200. By the time gas comes into your house, it has to be reduced to about 3 pounds per square inch. And it will connect the Millennium in the south, as we talked about before, and then the Tennessee gas in the north. There'll be at least one compressor station along the way. Compressor stations are not good neighbors. They run 24/7. There's a lot of noise, a lot of volatile organic chemicals are emitted from them, a lot of methane leaks from them. And they have dangerous problems in and of themselves. As I said before, it'll run along the abandoned Sun pipeline. In May, we saw their non-binding open season announcement. The next step, that's a preliminary step with FERC. The next step will be the company doing what's called a pre-filing with FERC. And at that point, it becomes possible for citizens to become interveners. And we will be providing information about that when it's more timely. What we're trying to do tonight is prepare you for the visits of the landmen, because that's the first risk that's involved in this whole process. Now, along with the pipeline, we get other dangers. If you have a gas well, if the companies drill a gas well, they then have to connect that well with pipelines to get it to markets. So the closer the property is to a pipeline, the more likely it is that there will be fracking. And this is becoming even more of a risk with the new rule that the EPA has instituted that is called green lighting, that in 2015, they are not going to allow wells to be drilled until there's a way to collect the gas. What happens these days is they drill, they find the gas, and they just vent it off. Methane is a very volatile or dangerous climate change gas, and the EPA is trying to control that, so they're mandating that you either have a gathering line, those are the small lines that hook wells to these larger transmission lines, or you have enough tank capacity to store this. And so more and more fracking will go closer and closer to pipelines as we go along. They also need to store gas along the route. This is a seasonal commodity. It's produced 24/7. We have friends over in Watkins Glen that are pushing back against a proposal to store massive amounts of propane, butane, and gas underneath Seneca Lake in abandoned salt caverns. They like abandoned salt caverns. There's a business reason for that. And one of the other things that we have up there in the Tully Valley where they did the salt mining are abandoned salt caverns owned by the Honeywell Corporation. So that's another potential danger that comes with pipelines. You have compressors, and we're going to talk about eminent domain in a minute because eventually that's what the companies are going to threaten and use if they have to. So we've gone over this pretty much. We've had the pre-filing. The pre-filing will be the next step. Then there is a second formal step with FERC, that's the full filing. There are 3 opportunities for public comment along this way. Along this route. We will keep you notified of those. Please sign up if you want more information. We have a website that you can gather information on. And there's a listserv if you want to get general announcements that will keep you advised of this process. There is a process called intervenor status, which we will go over in later meetings. There are other agencies involved, which kind of is a risky situation because when you have more than one agency looking at any particular project, none of them seems to get the big picture, and sometimes we see things falling through the crack. The DEC has some authority as to how they do stream crossings, and one of our most potent weapons in the frac resistance of towns instituting bans and moratoriums cannot be used here. A town cannot use its zoning ability to keep a pipeline out. You can exclude compressors, but we're going to be doing more study into the FERC process and helping people parse through that. I read an article recently where one of the FERC commissioners was bragging about their high percentage of approval, showing how that showed that they were stable. So they approve almost every proposal that comes in front of them. We have a lot of work cut out for us. So this is the main purpose tonight. We'll have a question and answer at the end to answer your questions. Maybe more details along those lines that you want to see. But what we have seen and heard from other pipeline proposals is that those of you whose land they're going to target, you're going to get a letter from the landman first. And then the landman's going to come and visit you. The letter that we've seen used in the unconstitutional pipeline is a rush job. And it's aimed at getting you to sign right away. And this is exactly the same tactic that we have documented that are used by landmen in gas leases. Get them to sign right away. Don't let them think about it. Take them to a notary if you have to. We have the same MO and the same operating procedures for these landmen. And this is a very, very serious decision. It has mortgage and insurance implications. It has tremendous implications for all of your property, and you should not make that kind of a decision on the spur of the moment. You should get advice from an experienced eminent domain lawyer. We're trying to find those. And they will threaten eminent domain, but do not sign during that first visit. Do not cooperate with them. That's the message that we're really trying to give you, and I'm going to explain why I say that now. So, the letter that the landman sent to the people to the east of us, first of all, they're only buying a strip of your property, not all of it. They're buying the right to use a 50 to 100-foot strip. Now, that could cut right across the most valuable part of your property. It could cut across the corner. It will go where they want it to unless you resist. But they only value that strip. So if you have 120 acres and they're going to take 5 of it for their strip, they're only going to offer you, their offer is based upon the value of that relatively narrow strip. And that's one of the flaws in what they're going to present you. Because this letter that they sent, and we've seen them, says, we're going to offer you 3 times the value of the easement, but in order to get that, you have to sign in the first 30 days. If you don't sign in the first 30 days, our offer reduces to twice the value of just the easement. Nothing else is negotiable. Not the route, not the size of the pipe, not whether or not they can come back in and put 5 or 10 more pipes, not what product can be moved through the pipe. They will tell you that nothing else is negotiable. You can either take this price or leave it, and if you don't take it, we're going to get it anyway through eminent domain. That's what you will hear. That's what our neighbors over near Cooperstown in that area are already hearing. And the problem is that ignores the impact on the rest of your property. And that's why it's not good to accept that initial offer. Because if you go to eminent domain, then the referee or the court will allow you to be credited for the damage to the highest and best use of the full property, not just the narrow easement. So that's one tremendous advantage of not taking the initial offer. And all of those non-negotiable things that they claimed at your door were non-negotiable will be factored into an eminent domain hearing. Companies don't like to use eminent domain because it costs them money, not only the process, but they also end up paying much more fair value for what they take. The things that you would want to be concerned with, if you remember those pictures of the pipeline going past the house, is where their easement is. It's your land. You should be having a say in that. They're going to tell you that's non-negotiable. How many pipes they can put in the future and what size. The danger to the entire value of entire property, that's what we've talked about. You'll hear from the next speaker about what they do with trees. They just cut them down and burn them. They don't make any use of all of the millions of trees that this will destroy. And then once they put a pipeline in, they maintain it. You can't allow roots to grow down towards the pipe. So they use herbicides annually, and a lot of herbicides. And so that's something that you won't hear from the landman either. And what can go through the pipeline? People that thought that they were getting a gas pipeline now find that they're putting tar sands crude through it. Those are some of the, because of the abrasive nature of the tar sands crude, it has caused several major pipeline breaks. But they're going to tell you you don't get any control over that. If you go to eminent domain, you can demand that it only handle what you agree to. And once you sign an easement, they can put a compressor station there. That will be part of their easement, and you do not want a compressor station on your property. Those are the kinds of things that you can talk about if you resist this initial non-negotiable offer. Now, because there's an old easement out there, and these are the ones that they're very hard to find because they're so old. They're going to tell you, look, we got an old easement. We can come on your property and do what we want. Our advice to you is to say, show me that easement. You leave me a copy of that document that you claim gives you the right to come on my property, and I want to check it with my lawyer. And then we'll look at those and see just exactly what is given away in those. We're going to try to go back into the county clerk's office in Cortland within the next couple of weeks and find some of the old ones. The wording of an easement is very, very critical to what is given away. Many of them only allow one pipeline. You can't come back and use a pipeline that was given in the 30s for a 6-inch gas pipeline and use that as the basis to put in a 24-inch high-pressure natural gas pipeline. So if they claim that they have a right, make them produce the document, take the document, get it to us, I will review it, we will get you legal help with that. So don't be bullied having them say, oh, we have a right. Make them prove it. So that's why we say do not sign. You're not getting a good offer. They're telling you that things are not negotiable, that are your right to have a say in, and you should not take that initial offer. The other advantage of not going along originally is, in order to get a complete application to FERC, they need to have surveyed their entire pipeline. If they can't get on your property to survey, that's another hurdle to slow them down. So we can go over that more if there are questions later on. The next area I want to talk about briefly here is that this is a very explosive material that is going through these pipelines. And every pipeline is made out of steel, and it's welded at regular intervals. There are welds constantly along the pipeline. Some of these pipelines, I can remember, I grew up in northern Oswego County when they put the gas pipeline through Sandy Creek in the 50s. I remember when that happened because I didn't have to carry out the coal ashes anymore. But that pipeline is now almost as old as I am, which means it's getting on in years. So there are dozens of major pipeline explosions throughout the country every year. And we just want to go over a few of these briefly because we need to, some people say, oh, what's wrong with a pipeline? Well, I think you'll see some neighborhoods here that could help you understand that. If you want to get a general example of this, just put gas pipeline explosions in Google and see what Wikipedia shows, which is a list of all of the major explosions over the last 10 years, and you can scroll down it until you put yourself to sleep. There's that many. There's also the Transportation Department Pipeline and Hazardous Material Administration, where you can get information about that. We're going to talk about, I'm going to give you some brief review of probably one of the worst explosions back in 2010, what it did, what caused it, and the extensive damage. Some recent explosions that we picked up in May when we started to study this, and then problems that have already been documented and haunting the current pipeline, Millennium Pipeline, and this is the same company that wants to build this one. So this is a picture of San Bruno, California. This is a pipeline explosion that destroyed, it's a 30-inch pipeline explosion in a residential neighborhood. 8 people were killed, 38 homes destroyed immediately, 55 were eventually had to be taken down. A wall of fire over 1,000 feet high. It took 60 to 90 minutes to shut the gas off because they hadn't installed automatic valves. And it evacuated a crater that was 167 feet long, 26 feet deep, 26 feet wide, 40 feet deep. A big explosion, a dangerous explosion that killed people and ruined dozens of homes. The following January, 3 or 4 months later, an independent state audit found that Pacific Gas and Electric, that's the owner of the pipeline, illegally diverted over $100 million from a fund that was earmarked for pipeline safety to executive salaries. This is more pictures of the destruction. This map shows you the homes immediately destroyed or damaged. This is what it looked like afterwards. Those are just brick chimneys left. That's what's left. Last 2 weeks ago, PG&E finally agreed to pay over $500 million to the families that they hadn't settled with previously. They paid more than $1 billion in damage because of this one explosion. And what we see is that the regulatory agencies allow communities to be built up over pipelines or pipelines to run underneath homes. Then we started to take a look in Pennsylvania, where they're building pipelines very, very rapidly because of the gas drilling that's down there. And we've got a couple of examples of that. This is one from April of 2013, where gas spills in Lafayette Township. That's the article itself. These are the details of it. A considerable amount of gas and crude oil blew out of a pipeline when a valve broke in Lafayette, Pennsylvania. A passerby noticed that oil was shooting 60 feet into the air out of the pipe, and a great deal of gas blew off for 3 hours until they could control it. And fortunately, some of these do not get ignited. Some of them do, and then we have tremendous damage from them. So that's one incident. In May, so that was April of this year, these are just ones that we could find very quickly. In another town in Pennsylvania, a compressor blew up. There was evidence of a blow up with, these compressors are not just little, what we think of when we think of compressors. Some of them are football field size buildings with many compressors inside them. This was a big one like that, and it blew out the walls. It said there was evidence of bulging walls from the explosions of the gas compressor. This was the second fire at that compressor in 14 months. And so that's what happens with compressors. And then this one was in June, so we have April, May, June. You can see that these happen very regularly. In Louisiana, this is a 300-foot hole. You can see what happens to the steel pipe from the veracity of these explosions, and it just creates these huge craters, and any homes or people or animals that are anywhere near it suffer the consequences. And that one was described as a pre-dawn explosion. Evacuations, the amount of scorched earth made the explosion look as though a bomb had detonated, and about an 80-foot piece of pipeline was blown away. So that's one of the drawbacks of pipelines. In general, then we have the Millennium Company itself. And the Millennium Pipeline was built in 2007 and 2008. That's the one that runs from east to west. That's the one they want to hook to. And that company, within 3 years of building that pipeline, they found leaks bubbling up through a spring. Within 3 years, there was such a bad weld that it was bubbling up, gas bubbling up through a spring. And when they went back and examined the records, they found dozens of faulty welds that should never have been delivered to the construction site, should have been held back because they knew they were inadequate, and yet the company pushed those faulty welds into the pipeline and buried them, thinking they could get away with it. This is the company that wants to build this pipeline. That's their way they conduct business. And so on January 11th of 2011, they discovered this leak. 1.3 million cubic feet of gas escaped, and they found the Public Service Commission inspected the line and they determined the leak was a defective weld, and there were several other welds, dozens of other welds that were in the same rejected phase that got put into the pipeline. Other welds with similar defects may also develop leaks and potentially lead to a rupture of the pipeline. So you have these steel pipelines welded together, no inspection, no supervision. We'll take questions at the end, I'm sorry. And this is what happens. Now, when Millennium they did their public announcement, and they sent letters to every town along the route, or at least they did to Preble. When we looked at the Preble letter, we found this claim, and this is much like the claim of the frack industry that this is all about energy independence. They said, this pipeline is designed to benefit more rural customers in New York. Well, unfortunately, that's not the case, because you can't take gas out of a major 24-inch high-pressure pipeline and just run it into a house. There's a number of reasons you can't do that. Certainly, the pressure is one. You have to depressurize it multiple times. The gas that's going to run through this pipeline from the wells in Pennsylvania will not be separated or cleaned. And so there'll be more than one kind of gas in it. There's no odorant in the gas that comes through a pipeline. The odorant is the smell they put in the gas so that if it leaks at our house, we can smell it. It's a safety measure. That's not in the gas that goes through the major pipelines. So any claim that it's designed to provide more rural customers, unless there's a local distribution system in place, or unless one is subsequently built, and they're not building pipelines now, this is really about moving frack gas from one market to another so that the three companies that own Millennium can make more money. And so then we have to ask ourselves, well, where's this really going? And what will they do with the gas? And to help us understand that, we've taken a hard look at the company's SEC filings. So it's going to take the Pennsylvania gas from the southern tier up to the Tennessee gas. It can go either directions. These pipelines are now, can be made to go either way by changing valves and compression. And if it goes to the east, it goes to a liquid natural gas facility in Everett, Massachusetts, just north of Boston. That facility is owned by a company, it's called Distrigas of Massachusetts, which is owned by GDF Suez Company. GDF stands for Gas de France. Millennium is owned by three corporations, one of which is National Grid. We all think National Grid is a local company. In fact, that's not the case. It's a British corporation. And when you read their international filings, their business model is importing gas into England and Europe where they can sell it for 5 times as much. So this is really about moving gas that they can sell overseas. If it goes to the west, it can hook up, well, let's stick with the export market just a minute, because we've been told that fracking is about getting us more energy independence. Well, unfortunately, that's not true either, because what they've done is they produce so much gas that they've driven the price of gas down to where they can't make any money with it. It's gone from $11 a million cubic foot to where it's now down below $3, and they can't make a profit at that low level. They can sell gas for 5 to 6 times as much in Europe and Asia. And so the companies are investing billions of dollars to export our gas. There are 26 pending applications before the Federal Energy Commission to export gas. And in the last few months, just since May, the Energy Department has approved 3 of them. This is an announcement from May that the U.S. approves expanded gas exports. This is a facility in Texas. And what they said at the time was that this is an important harbinger for the remaining applications to export gas. And unfortunately, that's proven all too true. It opens the dam for the pending applications, those 26 other applications that we're talking about. So what they do is that they pressurize the gas and liquefy it, put it in these giant ships, and then send it over to England or to Japan, where they can get so much more for it. And the GDF Suez terminal in Boston is one of the ones that has an application for export pending. Then in September, we saw that Dominion was approved for an export terminal in Chesapeake Bay. This is from the article itself, from Bloomberg News. It said the price is too low here, so they are exporting it. And then on August, they approved one in Lake Charles, Louisiana, that's partially owned by BG Group, a British company. The first application they approved was a joint venture between Exxon, that owned 30%, and the Qatar Oil Company. Qatar is a small peninsula in the Persian Gulf, and it's not exactly an American corporation. So this is the kinds of companies that are taking our gas to sell it overseas, and they want us to pay the price for it back here. The other use for this frack gas is the tar sands exploitation. The tar sands in Alberta is the dirtiest source of energy in the world, And the reason it's so dirty is that it takes so much energy to extract it. You either have to heat the bitumen on the surface, which is one way they mine it, and they have to get the sand out of it. You have to use gas to heat it. The other method is deep injection of steam, all of which is heated by fracked gas. So that's what this pipeline is about. It's not about bringing gas to any of our homes. That's more about the tar sands. Gas is the largest single input cost for the in situ. That's what it's called when they use the steam. And so getting cheap fracked gas is used against the environment in another situation. So that's the kind of dangers that we see. One of the things, and that's most of the substance of the presentation that I wanted to give you, but I just want to cause us to think about where we are relative to climate change. Because the more gas and oil infrastructure we build, the more we doom our children and grandchildren to this fossil fuel habit that we have that's heating the earth. It's not morally defensible, and even though we don't like to think about it, we have to figure out how we're going to reduce our fossil fuel habit. Building more pipelines and storage facilities is not going to do that. The jobs are very fleeting, and what New York really has to do is become the renewable energy capital of the United States. We could do that. Those are local jobs. They stay. Much of this is reducing the use, but through weatherization, all local jobs. And there are a lot of other alternatives that we need to think about very briefly, and then I'll turn it over to Craig. So we've been trying to tell Albany that we're at a crossroads, and we have to make decisions now. I call it our Sputnik moment. Most of us remember what that meant back in the 50s, that we were seriously challenged by a scientific challenge from the Soviets when they launched the first satellite. We are now challenged, and the future generations are challenged as to whether or not this area will still be inhabitable, whether or not vast areas of the earth will still be inhabitable. If you want a wake-up call, rent the DVD Chasing Ice. It's new, and it talks about how the glaciers are melting and what the catastrophic impact of that will be, and the rise of the sea level and all of that. This is what's going on. Climate change driven by fossil fuel, driven by the tar sands, and driven by frack gas. And we need to take a stand against that. This is a small vertical access wind turbine that we're talking with the developer about installing in our house. They can, because they're so small, you can put them near buildings, on buildings. That's just one alternative. We know about big wind. There are problems with that, but we're learning how to make them more safe. This is our basement. This is a geothermal heating unit that we drilled a couple of deep holes to get enough water for the mass. Then you use a heat exchanger, and that is how we heat and cool our house. All these tubes are radiant heat that go into the floor, and this is before he installed the forced air to back it up. No fossil fuel being built. There is some electricity being used. That's why we want to move to solar and wind production as well. We know about solar. This is what we need to be doing, or else we're not going to be able to answer our grandchildren when they ask us, what were you doing back then when you had a choice? So we don't want them to turn our lakes into things like this, and that's my position. But we need to think about stopping this pipeline, and you want to say no to those landmen, do not sign. And this is how we can help you with information. You have the Stop the I-81 pipeline, and there are handouts that have all of this. That's my contact information. And also there's gas drilling awareness of Cortland County. And we'll take questions after we hear from Craig Stevens. Thank you for listening.